It's been a rough couple of weeks for the Biden administration, and now Democrats and the media are realizing they can no longer cover up the president's age concerns.
They've tried. They can't anymore. So let's go off the wall and look back at how we got here. Well, first of all, they nominated the oldest nominee that would be 86 when he finished his term. And this is back in January. Well, this is a poll, 1,000 registered voters. Are you concerned about that he'll be too old to be president? Even then, before what we saw in the debate, 3/4 of voters said big concern.
Yeah, 76% major concern. And yet, Democrats, as we spoke about a little bit earlier in the show, forced Joe Biden through, engineered the primary to ensure, for the second election cycle in a row, to ensure that Joe Biden is the nominee. In February of 2023, the DNC approved a proposal to make South Carolina the first official primary. And then all the way into January, they ensured that Joe Biden's name was really the only name that was going to be appearing on these ballots, from New Hampshire all the way through to making sure Dean Phillips and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. would not be a threat to Joe Biden.
Absolutely right. The so-called party of democracy rigged their own democratic process to make sure there was little to no resistance to Joe Biden, because the people closest to him inside the White House and the DNC, they knew his diminished state. They knew if he had to vigorously campaign against legitimate opponents, it would be difficult. So they moved the calendar, didn't participate in New Hampshire, and sure enough, he clinched the delegates, which he's now leaning on, Will. Oh, I have the delegates by March of 2024.
And we've been talking about this. Dean Phillips has been talking about this primary.
I'm not going to say anything about what he needs to do. The president understands the consequences. I think he'll make the right decision. I'm going to let him do that before I make any more comment.
Have some of your colleagues come up to you privately since and said, hey, you were right, I'm sorry, they'll be taking it seriously?
Yes, and reporters.
Talk about a guy vindicated. The premise of his candidacy was, this guy's just too old. He's not prepared to be president. I think I can step up. He didn't have a lot of grievances with Joe other than, I think a new generation should come in. Here he is.
Now, remember, everyone seems to have had this revelation following the CNN presidential debate almost overnight. But if you've been paying attention, and we know that you have, this hasn't been something that's become obvious overnight. We can go back. Of course, we can go back years, but one of the most stark examples of this was in February when Special Counsel Robert Hur said that Joe Biden was essentially too old and too senile to prosecute for his classified documents case, that a jury would look at him as a sympathetic old man.
Yeah, it was very interesting because you don't get many glimpses from official Washington that read like this. Cable news is one thing. A special counsel report is another. Sympathetic, well-meaning, elderly man with a poor memory. This was part of the rationale as to why the documents case was not brought against him.
And when we talk about accountability for covering up Joe Biden's threat to national security, we need to always remember who, through Robert Hur at that time in defending Joe Biden, absolutely trashed the special prosecutor.
The way that the president's demeanor in that report was characterized could not be more wrong on the facts and clearly politically motivated.
I am a little puzzled why the special counsel chose to make statements that he had no business making.
The root of the scandal here, too, Will, is Kamala Harris knows.
Yeah.
She's with him all the time.
Right.
If anybody knows, it's her. If anybody knows that he is indeed an elderly man with a poor memory, it's Kamala Harris. Yet they keep pushing her out, and others who, because of their access to power, will lie to us from their positions of power about the commander-in-chief.
And now she stands to benefit from this entire story after being one of the biggest perpetrators in the cover-up. By the way, the Washington Post, now looking to push Joe Biden out in many of its editorials, wrote then the full transcript of Biden's interview with the special counsel paints a nuanced portrait. That's what they said in March. They said the president doesn't seem as absent-minded as Hur made him out to be. They've now found Jesus. They've now seen the light when it comes to Joe Biden.
And the Washington Post, nobody better at getting leaks in Washington, D.C. Somehow they just haven't gotten a leak of the actual audio transcript of that interview.
Right.
Maybe they will now that they're trying to push old Joe out the door.
Now, this is one of the most egregious examples. This is what they were saying, a week before the CNN presidential debate?
Crazy.
They were talking about any video that demonstrated his inabilities as cheap fakes.
They made the term up, right? There's deep fakes and there's cheap fakes, meaning, hey, on the internet, someone could quickly and easily modify a video, make it look real, and make Joe look bad. And the talking point went out quick across all of official Washington. From the podium, this is what you say. Here's Karine Jean-Pierre and another member of the campaign.
Instead of Republicans, focusing on the president's performance in office and what he's been able to accomplish, his actual record, they do these cheap fakes.
Donald Trump, who, by the way, has to resort to lying, has to resort to, as you mentioned earlier, his campaign putting out these cheap fakes.
It's egregious. They just make up a new word and blame it on.
And it went everywhere. Washington Post, New York Times, Associated Press. Cheap fake went viral for about a week.
But you can't fake what we actually saw, whether it was turning away from parachuters or being escorted off the stage by Barack Obama. These things get out there. They try to deny them, but they're self-evidently true.
Then comes the CNN presidential debate and the realization. And then you see everything change. ABC News, we didn't know quite what to make of it, but we thought that was different and that it was that he seemed altered. This is from Congressman Ron Reynolds, a Democrat from Texas.
And then you got the George Clooney op-ed, which he cleared through Obama, where he said, hey, he was at my fundraiser. The Joe Biden you saw on TV on CNN was the same Joe Biden I saw at my fundraiser. Pretty devastating op-ed coming from him, considering
just
his
a few
sway.
examples. Of course, you've seen it everywhere, from cable news channels to the 19 Democrats that have distanced themselves from Joe Biden. Now, after participating in the cover-up for years, now they truly want to tell the truth about Joe Biden.
Because they couldn't cover it up on a debate stage. Yep.
Down ballot.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.